Hello everyone, in today's video we're taking a look at the Airbus A320 Neo V2. Hey, I got it, perfect. In this video we're going to be setting up the FMS manually without any external assistance, which is going to make for a rather long video unfortunately, but for those of you looking to do these things the hard way, we'll show you. In the next video, of course, we'll show you the shortcut. Let's get started. So first things first, if this is your first introduction to an Airbus, you have to know that they do things philosophically differently than they do in Boeing. Whereas a Boeing, you've got all these different systems that, the pilot is really responsible for heading for things in a specific order. Airbus is about attempting to automate those things and making it so you just concentrate on the flying. Another big difference with Airbus is the fact, as you can see here, we have no yoke. We are a fly-by-wire airplane. So a lot of the things for autopilot are far more important than they are in other planes. It's almost like a 777 level of automation. With that in mind, it makes a little bit more work on the pilot for setting up the FMS. So let's go ahead and play with that first. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to float on down here. I'm going to go to my OFP page. I'm going to go ahead and download my most recent build of the flight plan I've been fiddling with a little bit here. Now, the reason I want to download this flight plan into here is because even though I'm not going to be using it for the purposes of importing data, I do want to have it all kind of ready to go for me so I can just look over here and kind of see the way we're going to do it. We're not actually going to be taking the Swan 3 here. We're going to be taking the Terps because unfortunately that is not a convenient way to go from that direction. I'm not going to worry about it too much. So what I'm going to do now is head over to ground. I'm just going to confirm I've got my GPU and my chalk set. We don't need to start on the GPU, ground power unit. We could also use, of course, the APU, but because we're going to be sitting here pushing a lot of buttons for a while, I figured just use the GPU. So that'll be fine. Lastly, of course, one of the things we want to do, of course, is get all of our payload all kind of squared away here. There's a lot of different ways to do this. We could sit here and kind of fiddle with these knobs, but one of the things that you probably noticed is if you went into this, you can actually see all of our different payload components broken down for us. Now, I am too lazy to sit here and kind of copy paste, copy paste, copy paste, copy paste. And if you get it wrong, of course, bad things happen. But again, here's all your weights right here. So I've got a packs of 180. So I come over here, back to my payload page. I drag this to 180 like that. And again, you can set this any way that you need to, as long as you stay within limits. I could float back up here. I can see my payload is 38.9 total. My actual cargo here, this is one of the mistakes I made earlier, it's actually 5.2. So I'm going to come up here and drag that sucker up to 5.2. Again, you don't want to overdo this, just like that. And again, you can get these values for wherever you need to. I just thought I'd show you kind of where it goes. And of course, fuel there, if I go back here, I think the recommended fuel here was 9.4, which is a little goofy. That's not a lot of fuel. I can't get over how fuel efficient this particular aircraft is. I'm actually going to leave it at like 9.5 there. So I'm going to press apply load, hit instant. Nothing bad will happen. You might hear some crunching and creaking noises as they basically load it up. And again, these values I took from SimBrief. You don't have to. You can pull them off wherever you want to. Again, I could have just fiddled with these. But for the purposes of calculation, and again, we're still entering things manually here, gives you an opportunity of what that could look like. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go floating up here. I'm going to go ahead and power up some external power by pressing this button right here. Now you'll notice I've got these two displays here basically letting me know what my battery charge is. We could turn our batteries on right now by clicking those two buttons, but you'll notice things do boot up, but not everything boots up. And again, the reason not everything boots up is because we're running purely on battery power. So instead, I'm going to go over to the external power, turn that on, and you'll see all sorts of things all energized at the same time. Now, Airbus has a slightly different philosophy when it comes to buttons. So, whereas at a Boeing, it's a switch, and you got to kind of figure out where the switch needs to be. Airbus is all about if the light is on, it needs your attention. You'll notice we got some orange lights saying something has failed. We have some white lights saying, hey, is this what you meant? And of course, we have some blue lights giving us a heads up saying, I'm pretty sure this is a special system, just so you're aware. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and get my navigational system booted up here. Now, to do that, I'm going to float up to my ADIRS panel. I'm going to go ahead and snap all those to the nav position. One of the cool things that we actually have in this aircraft, if I actually were to float over here, is under your options page, you actually have the ability to set the speed that those boot up. I've got it set for instant just for time's sakes. Otherwise, it's a lot of extra work. So with that all set and everything looking pretty groovy here, I'm going to go ahead and float down to my MCDU menu. A couple different options here. We, of course, have the ATSU, which is basically going to be air traffic communications. I'm not going to worry about that. We do have a printer, by the way, which I get such a kick out of. And, of course, then there's FMGC. You're going to hear me say FMS a lot, and people get pretty ragey on that because this is an Airbus and not a Boeing. But flight management system or flight management computer is easy to understand. So I'm going to come up here and push that button. It's going to go ahead and get this thing going. When this is going, by the way, you'll notice that there's two of these if you need to fiddle with the other one. So once that's all set, it's going to give you some critical details here. It's going to give you all your navigational database information, things like that. We can go take a look at software status and all that, but none of that really matters. What matters is this button that says INIT. Now, when you first set up an Airbus, you have to tell it where you are and where you're going, and then you can start going from there. One of the things you'll notice is it has this init request button here. This I'm going to ignore. Keep in mind this will be the shortcut. That'll be the next video. I'm going to ignore that for today. Instead, I'm going to get old-fashioned. I'm going to go ahead and type in where we are. We're at Baltimore Washington International Airport. You'll notice here, looking at the top, we've got the 4 boxes. We've got a slash. We've got the 4 boxes. It's expecting a slash, so I'm going to grab a slash, and now we're going to say where we're going to. Obviously, we're going up to Bradley today. Type that one in, KBWI, KBDL. Looks good. Click there. It's going to go ahead and make all sorts of noise, and it's going to say, hey, I have a flight plan in memory. Is this the one you want? No. And of course, now that we've done that, it knows where we're going from. It knows where we're going to. After that, of course, we can come in here and dial in whatever our flight number happens to be today. Let's say it's red 64 because reasons, cost index. So we had a video in this a little while back basically describing as the relationship between how much fuel you want to burn versus how much maintenance you want to pay for. So for me, I'm just going to put it 400 here. Keep it 480 will let me do that. Oh, why not? And then lastly, it's going to be asking for my cruise flight level / temperature. So I'm just going to come in here and type in 3500, 35,000 feet. Click there. You're probably saying, but you didn't put the slash in. Oh, no. It doesn't matter. As long as we specify what our flight level is going to be, it tries to estimate what the temperature at that altitude is. Now, in the old days, if I was still waiting for my IRS to finish booting up, I'd have to actually come over here and actually initialize it. The good news is it did all that for me because we had that little cheat gun going on. So that was the easy part. Now, of course, we're going to come down here. We're going to press this arrow. And now you're going to get a wave of numbers and start going, oh, my gosh, what number is what? Oh, my God, what number? Blah, blah, blah. In the old days, what you had to do with this airplane is you had to float your head back over here. You had to come over here, study all these numbers super carefully, make a mental note of it, then float back down here, and then dial them all in manually. And it was a pain in the butt. The good news is you don't have to do that anymore. All we have to do is click our mouse like that. It'll grab it for you. And all you have to do for block is click like that. And it'll grab it for you. That's it. You can see it has now gone ahead and grabbed all of our fuel prediction automatically. And it's pretty much good to go. That's as simple as that. We can go back here and go back to our initiation page. So we're good to go as far as initiation. That was the easy parts. Now here comes the hard part, the flight plan. So I'm going to go down to the flight plan button. And when you press that, of course, you're going to have all sorts of things start to appear. For those of you familiar with the Boeing way of doing things, you know these things are naughty, naughty, naughty. I know, fortunately, Airbus makes this a lot more complicated than our friends over at Boeing, in my opinion. So what we have to do is say how we're getting in the air, how we're getting on the ground, how we're going to get from the air to the ground to our route, and how to get from the air to the route to the ground. There we go, something like that, in order to get back to our thing. The short version is it's a lot of clicking, and you'll see what I mean. So first things first, let's go up to BWI and click on that little button next to it. You're going to notice we have an option for departure, which allows us to basically say how we're going to get to our route. So I'm going to go ahead and click that button. Now, there's 2 phases to this, and it's one of those things that makes our life very miserable. You'll notice here we have runway, SID, trans. Now, the reason that's important is we're currently on runway mode. If I press this arrow, it takes you to SID mode, and if I press this arrow, it takes you back to runway mode. So, for example, let's go up to, we're going to say 15 right is our runway today. When you do that, it's going to attempt to assume what SID you want. You can see Conley 5, Dupkin 1, Fixit 4, I can actually go up arrow, and of course, Terp Z8. One of the things you're observing here is my Swan 3 is not an acceptable way to get in the air. Sigh. So unfortunately, what we're going to have to do is actually pick Terp Z8 here as my departure, even though my flight plan calls for Swan. Sigh. So I'm going to go ahead and push that. It's going to say, now, what is your final transition? This would be the waypoint that gets you onto the actual flight plan itself. Now, if you happen to have a handy-dandy guide that might help you with this. Oh, would you look at that? I happen to have a handy guide that might help us with this. What you'll observe here is these are all the different positions, and these are all the different ways, basically, to get onto it. For example, Jawal is right there. This is if you're basically going straight east. R215 right, like this big honking guy right here. You can see we can go to Warren and basically swing around here with Bobby J and NoPro and things like that, depending on what it is we're trying to find. So heading back over here, as we've gone to zip through this real quickly, trying to find one of the ones that'll work. Oresen's not too bad. Hedwig's not too bad. Peach-Hen is actually probably optimum. You have all the different choices here. It's just important that the one that you do pick is the one that's going to get you basically best lined up for your actual flight itself. So what I'm actually going to do here is I'm going to leave out at the transition point because Terps is actually a really good spot for us to sort of jump onto things. It's going to be a little bit of kind of back and forth. So I'm going to press Insert. Now, as soon as you do that, of course, what you'll notice here is everything will update real fast. And you can actually see our waypoint here is Warren, which is exactly the waypoint that I wanted. And you'll notice after Warren, of course, we're going to Bobby J, then we're going to Flaco, Wants, and then there's Terps, which is going to be kind of that entry point that's going to get us going into our actual flight itself. So from here now, we have to be able to go ahead and dial in our next waypoint. Now, for those of you who are very, very familiar with our good friends over at Boeing, you probably know the way that you would do this is you come in here and just dial in whatever the waypoint is and click the button. You can kind of do that, and you'll see what I mean. So I'm going to go ahead and type in BROSS here, B-R-O-S-S. I'm going to go ahead and click right here. And what you'll notice is it puts it in perfectly. It's actually exactly what we wanted it to do. But I'm not done with this waypoint. BROSS is actually going to be the entry point for a Quebec airway. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click right here. And you'll notice it says you cannot do this because we have a temporary flight plan. You cannot edit things if it's temporary. I can't say that enough. So instead, I'm going to insert it like that. Then I'm going to go up to the one we just dialed in, BROSS, click on it now, and you're going to notice it's going to have an option for airways down here at the bottom. So I'm going to click on airways, and it's going to look for the name of the airway we're trying to do. So for us, we're going to be taking the Quebec 419er airway. Now when I click on that, this might look a little familiar here. Exactly. This is the old school, almost Boeing method of way of doing it. So it's going to ask us, where are we trying to get off here? In our case, so we're going to be getting off at DPK, which is going to be Deer Park. Now, if I'm happy with this and I don't need another airway, I can just press insert. Now, as soon as I do that, we're now basically done. So if I float here, you'll see we go from Wanset to a Flaco, we go to Chirps, we go to Bros, we go to Myfu, Nason, Bethurk, Hulk. Isn't that fun? RBV, and of course we'll learn JFK, Deer Park, and then we have our discontinuity. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and dial in how we're going to be getting into Bradley. So I'm going to go ahead and click right here. It's going to say arrival. We're going to be doing 6 today, and we're going to be coming via Deer Park. Now you'll notice, ta-da, Deer Park is there waiting for us. So I'm going to go press DPK for Deer Park, press insert, and voila, if I scroll all the way down now, you'll see that we smoothly transition from into the air, onto the DAP, onto our actual flight, onto that airway, onto the arrival, and then down to the ILS without having to delete any of these discontinuities because of that consistency. Kind of handy, huh? So now everything's all set. And the way I know everything's all set is not only do we have no discontinuities, but you can see we're starting at 15 right here. We're ending at Bradley 6. Isn't that so cool how that works? I like that. So lastly, of course, once that's all squared away and we're good to go, usually people save at that particular point. We can pop over to the performance page and we can basically dial in our last couple values. Now, the reason this is easy is because if I float over here real quick, if we go down to takeoff real quick, you'll notice there's a sync button here, and I can push that, capture all the details I need, come down here and press calculate. And one of the things I really love is there's actually a button that can send it to your computer. So if I send it to the computer and zoom down, you can actually see the values chilling there waiting for you. Now, you really, really want to push this button, but you'll notice it says that does not work. So instead, you just have to sit here and do it the hard way. You got to do all the values that you see. Whoops, helps if you type it properly, 148. Go ahead and dial that in. You can see the 150. You can dial it in that way. And now we're pretty much ready to go. If we're doing a flex takeoff, of course, one of the things it will not do is copy that. We have to actually come over here and copy that value. 58 is a little extreme for a flex takeoff, and not going to lie. But we'll go ahead and dial that because reasons. Looks good to me. Confirm takeoff date. I push the button, and that's it. We can, of course, set all the things up. You see all of our values are exactly what we got over on the other side. And we are now ready to start. So as you can see, it's a bit of an involved process to program that by hand. There's a lot of buttons, a lot of switches, a lot of little doodads that you have to kind of get right perfectly. Because if you miss one little tiny detail, you're going to make yourself insane later on when you're trying to delete discontinuities, or your altitude needs to come down to 5,000 and all those kinds of things. In the next video, we'll show you the short version. Enjoy.